Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched The Fall Guy. Let's talk about it. So The Fall Guy is directed by David Leitch, who is very well known in the action movie space. He of course directed Bullet Train, Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2, the list goes on and on. He's also one of the John Wick originators. Thank you very much. And he has also been working in the industry for many years as a stuntman. So he is very close to the topic at hand for this movie, and it is likely what inspired him to make this remake, technically, of the original series to begin with. So when it comes to my thoughts on David Leitch's films, I tend to be a big fan of them. I really like action films, especially when the action is very well choreographed and we have some really cool hand-to-hand combat sequences, which we tend to have in David Leitch's movies. So I'm a fan. Like overall, like I'm a fan of his movies. I liked Bullet Train much more than the vast majority of people seemed to. I was okay with that. Okay, although I will say some of the critiques that I had for Bullet Train may or may not be relevant to this movie as well, which we'll touch on in this review. So we have much to discuss, but before we get into the nitty-gritty, as always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now without further ado guys, let's get into this. So first off, let's jump into the story. Let's jump into the plot of The Fall Guy. The Fall Guy has the misfortune of being a movie about Hollywood. A Hollywood movie about the industry itself, taking a look at behind the curtains of the industry. We'll talk about why that might be a misfortune in a second, but here we have a particular focus, a devoted ode to stunt performers. This movie is all about celebrating stunts, stunt performers, the unspoken heroes of cinema, especially these days in 21st century Hollywood, where there are so many major blockbuster superhero movies, Mission Impossible movies, and action movies alike coming out year after year that are heavily reliant on these extremely talented physical performers. And who better to give stunt performers their flowers than a former stuntman himself in the form of David Leitch. And so the plot of this film is really just a second thought. This movie is really just a vessel to celebrate stunt performances in the industry. But in terms of the plot, if we really want to get into it, I mean, you have Ryan Gosling's Colt, who is a stuntman, and he is extremely well regarded. He's a pro, he's good at his job, he's been doing this for a while, and he in fact is the stunt double to a super famous action movie star called Tom Ryder, who is played by Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who's become a fave of David Leitch's after starring in Bullet Train, of course. And predictably, this Tom Ryder fellow sucks. Like he's literally the worst. He sucks, he's arrogant, he's selfish, he's obnoxious. And on top of everything, on top of all of these unlikable traits, he has this memento thing going. He has this memento thing where he needs to write everything down on a post-it note, and his glorious, luxurious apartment is covered in post-it notes because he's a dummy, because he's a fool. So yeah, he absolutely sucks, but Colt is just happy to be in the industry. He's good at what he does, and he's good at making Tom Ryder look good in his movies. And so he's living the life, you know, both in terms of his professional career, but also his private life, because he has a love, yes he does, in the form of Emily Blunt's Jodie, who when we first meet her is like a camera operator, but she's an aspiring director, and they have this fling going on where really they're in love and they're happy together and they're excited to be on a beach to drink some dirty martinis, or no, it was margaritas, sorry, dirty margaritas. Like they have plans, they're falling in love, all is well in the world. until until unfortunately Colt has this horrific accident that leads to his back breaking during a fall that was supposed to be a stunt in the movie. And this was a stunt that Colt had already performed. That's the annoying thing. He had already done his job and had done it well, but Tom Ryder decided that there was too much face and he doesn't want his stunt double, taking all of the glory, taking all of the limelight away from him. So he demanded that he do it again. And this time around, it didn't work out and Colt ended up falling flat on his back and breaking it. And that put him out of commission for 18 months where he couldn't work and he completely shut himself off from the rest of the world, including from his lady love, Jodie. But not all hope is lost, because 18 months later, out of the blue, Colt gets a call from Gail, who's portrayed by Hannah Waddingham, icon, legend, okay? And Gail, who is this like stereotype of a Hollywood producer from like the 80s, actually, especially with her look. She looks straight out of 1987. But anywho, so she's like this fast talking, coke drinking, coke sniffing, who knows, Hollywood producer who is Tom Ryder's producer and representative, and she calls Colt to work on Tom's new movie called Metal Rider, metal bullets, something to do with metals, okay? It's just this generic sci-fi blockbuster that just so happens to be directed by Jodie. Yes, Jodie is making the jump to director, and it's a really big deal for her. And so, of course, she needs the greatest stuntman alive to be working on her project, or at least that's what Gail tries to convince Colt, and she convinces him that it was actually her idea to call him on, even though they haven't been in contact for a year. And so Colt shows up, innit? It's a setup. Colt shows up and he's like, okay, great, like I'm going to work with Jodie, and it was all her idea, except of course it wasn't. Of course it absolutely was not. This is a classic rom-com setup situation, and shenanigans ensue, and it's all fun and cute until until a bigger conspiracy comes to the fore, where there's a murder involved, and perhaps a movie star is even bigger of a scumbag than we thought he was. And so yeah, chaos ensues. And so there you have a brief-ish summary of the plot of The Fall Guy, which, get it? It's a double entendre, because he's a fall guy, but also he's the fall guy for the murder. Like, do you get it? So as you can probably tell from my face, I actually had a really fun time with this movie. We'll get into my thoughts on all the different aspects of the movie. But first up, when it comes to the story, I will say this is the part that was like the most underwhelming. Like, I would say the story was only medium. I was down with the love story between Jodie and Colt, them trying to figure things out after he suffered that horrific accident, which wasn't even actually an accident. Tom Ryder sucks. Anyways, but yeah, exploring, how their relationship broke down and how that really upsets both of them and how they're kind of in denial. Like, all of that was really interesting to me. I thought that Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling had really great chemistry together. I wouldn't say it's like sizzling, like I wouldn't say I was gagged, like I wouldn't say it was the most electric chemistry I've ever seen. By the way, I still haven't watched The Idea of You with Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Gillistein. Is that how you pronounce his name? Yeah, that's still on my watch list, okay? I am gonna check out that movie. But in terms of the chemistry here, I thought it was fun, I thought it was cute, but I wouldn't say it was like sizzling hot, especially not on this May 2024, when we're about to get Bridgerton season 3. Yeah, let's not push it. But then you also had the larger conspiracy at play with Tom Ryder's new stuntman being murdered by him, and then Gail came up with this plan to use Colt as the fall guy double entendre, the fall guy for that murder, and that's why she called him in the first place. And so that angle to me was, it was okay. I feel like it made sense at the end. As the story was playing out, it was a little bit confusing. Characters were acting in very frustrating ways that annoyed me, particularly Gail, you know, and that wasn't on Hannah Waddingham's performance. She nailed it, but just in terms of the writing, when you're watching it the first time around, you're like, why is Gail so annoying? What is Gail's deal? And then about like halfway through, you're like, oh, is she in on this? Like, she's part of the problem. Oh, okay, I see. I understand now. But yeah, there were definitely some characters making weird, bizarre, annoying decisions that honestly still don't make sense even after having seen the whole movie. And so I would say that larger conspiracy was a little bit wonky, a little bit weaker. But ultimately, I don't think it matters too much because, like I said, this whole movie is just a vessel in order to celebrate the work of stunt people. And celebrate stunts, this movie sure did. It sure did do that, because as is typical with David Leitch movies, we got some pretty cool stunts and action sequences, set pieces littered throughout this film. And so we had, you know, car chases, car explosions, pyrotechnics, cars flipping, a lot of things with cars, cars flipping, and then we had some hand-to-hand combat sequences, which always gets me really excited. And then we got some helicopter action, like they were in the sky, on the land, below the water, like they really covered all of their bases. Really covered all of their bases. There was a really cool scene that takes place in this club where it's like neon night, and you have Colt wearing this neon yellow suit, and it looks really, really cool. I would say that was one of the scenes that really stood out to me, and it gave me like John Wick vibes in terms of, you know, picking a sort of color story and a sort of vibe for an action scene that makes it really stand out. But there was plenty of really impressive work here, and I think in terms of this being a celebration of stunt work, which, by the way, absolutely deserves to be recognized by the Academy, which they had a line about in the movie, but the Academy is so ridiculous. It's so insane, because what do you mean you don't recognize stunt people? And you guys know how essential they are to the craft. So like, please be serious. Please fix that immediately. If you can finally recognize casting directors, then the next step up, okay, is to recognize stunt people. And no, having a montage of some of the most iconic stunts in cinema during your ceremony isn't enough. We need the gold. We need the gold where to be given to people who deserve it. Now, if I did have a tiny critique of the stunt work in the movie, it's actually a critique that I've had for several films this year, which is crazy. Maybe it's just me. You guys let me know if you agree with this. But I do think that in the last act of the film, there was this kind of bombardment of everything. It kind of became quite chaotic and noisy and loud and just like, whoa. So much was thrown at the screen that it made it tough for me, at least, to be fully invested in every single, you know, thing that was going on. It just felt a bit too much, too much of a muchness. And this is something that I said about Challengers and about Monkey Man as well. I think the comparison fits better with Monkey Man, in fact. It seems like the trend for directing these days is just throwing everything and the kitchen sink at us. And I don't think that's necessarily the best tactic. Here, I would say the first 2/3 of the movie kind of paced itself a bit better, but it was in that final act where it was just like, and here's everything, and that was just a bit overwhelming. Perhaps in a second watch it would be better to process because I know what's coming, but in the first watch I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're just doing it all now, okay. And to be fair, this isn't the first time that I've said this critique for David Leitch's films, because I also said the same thing about Bullet Train, which also had a very chaotic, bombastic third act that left me kind of disconnected from the story and the characters. Now, before we move on to the actors themselves, let's touch on the Hollywood of it all. Let's touch on the Hollywooding. Now, this is an observation that I just came up with myself, but it is one that I agree with. I believe it's Grace Randolph who always says this. She always says that people are not inclined to be into films about Hollywood. They love Hollywood films. Oh yes, we'll check out a movie that Hollywood produces, but people don't tend to be too interested in seeing what's behind the curtain, seeing the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day of what producers do and directors and stunt people. People don't tend to love that kind of movie or show or project in general. Now, we do have some exceptions, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but that is a Tarantino movie, so that's in a league of its own. But if you think of shows like Paramount Plus's The Offer, or Amazon Prime's The Last Tycoon, which starred Matt Bomer, or even Ryan Murphy's Hollywood, you know, these shows were all varying quality, although they tended to be really, really good overall, but they were never really huge hits. They were never really mega popular, you know, hits for their respective platforms. And people don't really talk about any of these shows anymore. I'd be surprised if any of you guys even recognize one of them out of the list. Like I said, that's because people don't tend to love shows or movies about Hollywood itself. Perhaps mainstream audiences find it to be self-indulgent or unrelatable. Whatever the reason might be, the facts are the facts. The stats are the stats, okay? And aside from a couple of exceptions, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or La La Land, which, you know, both cases, they had something else going for them besides just a deep dive into the industry. Overall, mainstream audiences don't tend to latch onto projects of this nature. And I think, sadly, the very disappointing box office for the opening weekend perhaps reflects this. But we had hoped that there would be some fire, there would be some spark in the box office, especially in light of the fact that we are in the midst of the Ryanaissance. We are in the midst of the Ryanaissance, okay? Ryan Gosling coming in hot, fresh off of the back of Barbie, where his Ken became an Oscar-nominated character, a character which I think deserved the win, but we digress. Ryan Gosling is having a moment right now, and so we thought that he'd be able to drive the box office of this movie, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to do so by much, at least. In fact, this movie fell flat of expectations that were in the 30s and 40 mils, coming in with 28, and it's like, oh, it's not looking too good. And I think it's a shame, because I do think that this movie deserved much better, but like I said, it's a tough hill to climb. But in terms of Ryan Gosling, no one can deny that this guy absolutely earned his paycheck, because he absolutely killed it in this role. He is so freaking charismatic. He is such a good actor. Like, who knew? Ryan Gosling is a good actor. Now, I love seeing Ryan Gosling on screen. I've been having my Ryanaissance ever since the release of Netflix's The Grey Man, which everyone in the world hated except me. Oh, and me and my family, actually. We had a good old time with The Grey Man. Okay, listen, we're not listening to the haters. That movie was good. That movie was fun, and the action sequences were sick. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm hoping for a sequel. Oh, fingers crossed. But in the meantime, I always love seeing Ryan Gosling on my screen. He has that very, you know, charming, charismatic personality, especially when he leans into that, you know, comedic sense, and that's exactly what he did in this role as well. There's a lot of comedy here. Not all of it landed for me personally. I didn't find this to be yuck funny, but Ryan Gosling is always a joy. Like, Ryan Gosling, especially in a comedic role, is always a win, and so I had a grand old time with him here. And then next up, we have the co-star. We have the love interest in the form of Emily Blunt's Jodie, and she was a really fun character as well. I like Emily Blunt. Yeah, I gave her such a hard time last year. I gave her such a hard time for getting all that awards recognition for her role in Oppenheimer, which I felt was undeserved, especially considering the nature of her role. But listen, okay? We've moved on. I'm a whole new person now. And so I can say I like Emily Blunt. I will say, I talked about this in the past. I don't like to touch on it too much because it is a very personal matter, and it's to do with societal standards of beauty and blah 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 blah. But I will say she unfortunately falls in the sort of category of actors, not just actresses, but actors who have had little bits and bobs done to their face that can be a little bit distracting when it comes to them trying to emote during their performance. I don't have a problem with anyone doing anything to their face, but when you're an actor, the minute movements of, facial muscles really does matter. It makes all the difference in your performance. And so when you have filler, when you have Botox, when you have this and that, and it can affect that, it can also affect your performance. And that doesn't just apply to Emily Blunt, because Ryan Gosling also had some bits and bobs done to his face. His face was looking quite full during the Oscars, but it looked okay in this movie. So I don't know what his regimen is like. But in the case of Emily Blunt, sis, stay away from the filler. Honestly, injectables have brought about the downfall of acting in Hollywood today. Honestly, truly, the biggest threat to acting as a craft isn't superhero movies. It's not mindless blockbusters, popcorn movies. No. It's fillers. It's injectables. It's Botox, because these people can't move their faces, and it really shows, and it's really distracting, especially with these 8K cameras that capture everything. But anywho, aside from that, I think Emily Blunt did a pretty good job. I think it would have been better if the love interest was an actress, because perhaps that would have given us a chance to see, more of the female character carrying out some really cool action sequences as well. But because she is the director, she doesn't really engage with a lot of those stunts in the same way. She has some cool moments where she's hitting people with props, that's fun. But I don't know, I feel like if maybe Jodie as a character was also an actress or also a stunt woman, then maybe we could have gotten more stunts from her as a female character. That could have been cool. Maybe she could have been Teresa Palmer's character, because Teresa Palmer's character was kind of like a non-character, really. This movie also had a really good supporting cast. Like I said, you have Hannah Waddingham and Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who are both really good. Aaron Taylor-Johnson's role was strange. I mean, the character of Tom Ryder is supposed to be like the stereotypical action movie man, leading man in Hollywood who sucks, who's the worst, has the worst personality, and is in with some really dodgy people as well. He just is the absolute worst. He absolutely sucks. So he plays that kind of character well, but there's nothing really three-dimensional about him. He just sucks, It's a very 2D character. And in the case of Hannah Waddingham's Gail, like I said, she makes some odd decisions and she moves really weirdly throughout the film. But then by the end, when you realize what her role is in all of this, as an architect of the whole plan, it starts to make a little bit of sense. But still, she does move strangely. She is very weirdly written, but it's always a welcome sight to see Hannah Waddingham on screen. We also got Winston Duke. Not enough of him in my opinion, but he's always a delight, as well as Stephanie Hsu. It's always so weird seeing actors who are so brilliant and so talented and have excelled in other roles be relegated to the side people to be relegated to side people in a major movie, blockbuster movie, with the archetypical white leads at the center. Because really and truly, this movie could have been about Winston Duke and Stephanie Hsu. Oh, let's speak on it. This movie could have been about them. They are on that level acting wise. So it's kind of weird to see them be good in their roles, but largely wasted considering their potential. But overall, when it comes to The Fall Guy, I thought this was a really fun movie. Even though the story wasn't my favorite and I didn't find it to be mind-blowingly well written, I think it works well as a vessel to celebrate the work of stunt people, and who better to do this than a stunt legend himself in the form of David Leitch and his production company 87 North. I thought the whole cast was great, and I'm really glad that Ryan Gosling is in his cheeky comedy era at the moment, because he suits that kind of role really well. So long as he doesn't overdo it and it becomes stale, I think we could get used to this side of Ryan Gosling, and if maybe one day it could lead to A Nice Guys 2. A Nice Guys 2. Oh, if one day the Ryanaissance could lead to the release of A Nice Guys 2, then it would have all been worth it. It would have all been worth it. Though, considering the opening weekend box office for this one, it doesn't look good, guys. It doesn't look good. Oh no. But I can still hope, okay? And in the meantime, I'm going to be giving The Fall Guy a 7 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on The Fall Guy, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.